Welcome back, everybody, to episode 8 now of the Wildcat Wire, and we're cruising on through these episodes, and I'm Nate Thomas, and I've got Jake Janisek here, and today we're going to start talking about some Millard West football. You know, they lost their last game a week ago to Omaha Burke in the state semifinals, 35-28, and their season is currently over. But, I mean, it's still a really great season for the football team, right, Jake?
Yeah, overall it's a pretty good season. Coming in to this year, they really had low expectations, I would say. Not a lot of people think they'd be that good, you know, losing a lot from last year, losing players like Brody Bell and Giovanni Guido, you know. It's hard to, just replace those players, but surprisingly, they were able to really fight through some adversity and be able to overall have an all right season.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is what I put down the preview. My expectations were for them to kind of push for a top 8 spot into the playoffs, maybe get one home game, but didn't really quite think that they'd make it through the second round. This was a team that was really young on the offensive side of the ball in the skill positions. I know the line had a lot of seniors on it. The defense had quite a bit of seniors, but overall the team didn't have a ton of experience with it. And so I think that was the one part where they just kind of lacked at the start of the year, but they kind of formed into a team that looked like they had made runs into the playoffs several different times, but none of them really had played on teams that had made the runs into the playoffs over the past few years. And so when they kind of grew into that role, they started producing some pretty good numbers on offense. They were outstanding on defense this year. It was really a surprise to me, but at the same time it really wasn't, because I knew that there was still some talent on this team.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of talent. The only kind of frustrating thing I would say is obviously, you know, they had a chance to get a number 1 seed, and then they lose to Lincoln East in a tough matchup where they might have just thought that they were kind of looking ahead probably, and lost that game, kind of losing the number 1 seed, which kind of hurt them. But it's also frustrating because I kind of want to talk about this latest game, Burke. The Wildcats really should have won that game, Nate.
Yeah, and so I'll just kind of give you a quick rundown of what happened in that game. Burke jumped out to a quick 14-0 lead, not 42-0. But they had a couple of really big touchdowns by James Burks and Xavier Watts. Millard West created a couple of turnovers, tied the game back up. And then that's when Burke kind of had the game-changing play in my mind, a 97-yard kick return for a touchdown right before halftime. And so the Bulldogs took a 21-14 lead into the break. Millard West came out, put up 14 quick points. And then that's just kind of when the game started to really turn. Burke gained the momentum back, put 14 points up themselves, and scored the winning touchdown with 15 seconds left. And they're the ones going into the state championship now here on Monday night.
But, I mean, I would probably have to mention with that is, you know, the Wildcats, you know, Tyler Chadwick, he turned it over. They weren't able to convert, missed a field goal, and then they get the ball back, and then Jackson Wright, you know, he fumbles. So it's just kind of a frustrating, kind of just a sad way kind of to end the season that way, where it's a game that you just were out of reach of.
Yeah, and I mean, you can really point to a couple plays. I'm not going to say it's the missed field goal by Sam Fetty, because, I mean, the Burke kicker missed a field goal in the third quarter that could have got them into the driver's seat of the game. So I really don't think that you can point it down to one play. You can't point it to the Jackson Wright fumble. You can't point it to the Sam Fetty field goal. I think one play that really did hurt the Wildcats, though, was the 4th and 5. Right at the end of the game. I know they ended up picking an automatic first down on that play, but right towards the end there, 4th and 5, Tristan Gomez drops back to throw. He has Dallas beat him over the middle of the field. The defender grabs Dallas and kind of plays over. You don't think much else about it. But if you go back and you watch that play, if that defender doesn't commit that pass interference, that's a touchdown. Because that ball was put in a perfect spot for Dallas to grab, and he's got nobody in front of him. So to think that we went from having almost a touchdown to then missing a field goal later that drive, Burke goes down. Everything that happens after that, but just that play, it's not even, you can't, it's just so weird to think about that you could have had a touchdown on that play, but a little simple thing a defender did, not even thinking about it in the moment, saves them the game.
Yeah, it was just a really frustrating game as a whole. I know the seniors on this Wildcat team are probably pretty frustrated. But next year, they at least have an experienced team probably coming in.
Yeah, you return a lot.
Offensively.
Yeah, you're losing Jackson Wright, who had over 1,000 yards this season rushing the ball, but you had Dan Sullivan coming back. You have Tristan Gomez. This will be the first full season that they'll have the triple option offense in place. I think they tried a little too much on offense down the stretch, but the loss of Coach Sherman, the offensive coordinator, right after the Grand Island game, I think was a pretty huge turning point because now you're bringing in a different option with 2 games left in the regular season and going into the playoffs as the number 1 ranked team at that time. And like you said, that Lincoln East game was really a turning point because they could have had Omaha Burke at Buell Stadium, and they could have been playing every game at Buell Stadium through the playoffs.
Well, they probably would have been playing Burke if they got the number 1 seed because Burke probably would have been number 2.
I think that's the question, though, is where would Burke have slipped? I think they were 3rd or 4th at that time. Millard West is ranked 1st, but, you have all these ranked teams at home, and so playing on the road at 20 degrees compared to playing at home at 20 degrees, you have the crowd behind your back. You know where you're playing. You kind of know how the situation was. Because I think one thing I talked with my dad about after the game was, where was the play clock inside Burke Stadium? I didn't see one in sight. And so I think that was just kind of a problem for that team the whole game. Millard West kind of runs a slow down offense. They're going to take a while in the huddle. They're going to snap it with just a few seconds left. So when you're heading down the stretch there and you know that you're in a good situation to score like they were before Fetty missed a field goal that would have put them in the lead, you don't exactly know how much time you had left on each play. And so maybe you could use up a couple more seconds and, you're thinking Burke doesn't have the same amount of time that they did when they scored the game-winning touchdown.
Yeah, it was a frustrating game as a whole, but we kind of talked about the low points of the season. Let's kind of talk about some high points of the season. Overall this team was pretty good.
Yeah, it was, and I think, the first game against Millard North was really a kind of a good win, but Millard North wasn't a great team this year. They didn't make the playoffs. They were stuck at a 4-5 record. But I think it just kind of gave them a little bit of momentum and knew, hey, we're not as bad as everyone thinks we are. We're not a middle-tier team. We should be at the top where we deserve to be. But, and I think even though they lost to Omaha Burke in Week 2, I really think that was a learning experience for them. That was still a really good game because they knew going down the stretch they'd have to work harder. They're going to play these tough teams in tough environments. And so it really grew up all these players super fast that hadn't been playing on the varsity level for very long. But, otherwise, I think you can say, the 2 really high points for the team this year were that one in overtime against Millard South, the comeback in the fourth quarter, and that win against Grand Island, and pretty tough rain and cold in October.
Yeah, this team did a lot of things successful, like you said, game against Millard South in overtime, the game against Grand Island in overtime. It was honestly pretty exciting season, and there's definitely a lot of hope for next year.
Yeah, you take away a lot on the defensive side of the ball, but like I said, you have Dallas Beanham coming back, the leading receiver, who had, I believe, just over 600 yards this year. Tristan Gomez, who threw for over 1,000 yards and rushed for 600. So, and also we haven't even said Dan Sullivan coming back, who emerged late in the season, Lincoln North Star and that Omaha Westside game where he had almost 200 yards rushing. So you bring some of these guys back, you have an offensive system in place, you kind of have everything settled. You're not trying to fight through different positional battles because this team went through a 2-quarterback system for the first 3 games. And so you kind of, I said this during the Millard South game or Omaha North, but being able to kind of choose that quarterback that you're going to roll with for most of the season is pretty huge because then you're not trying to flip between systems, 2 different play styles, because that's the way Tristan and Nate were. Tristan is a little bit more mobile, but we think Nate Glantz was able to kind of throw the ball a little bit better, deeper down the field. So, I mean, you're just playing to strengths when you're running a 2-quarterback system. So you come back, you get everything kind of settled in offensively and defensively, but I really think this team can be good next year. And I just want to add this one last thing about Omaha Burke. You can't quite be mad about that game. Omaha Burke was the preseason number 1. They were inked in to win the state championship, almost set in stone. Like, it's going to take quite a bit for this team to lose against someone. But I think you just really have to credit that Millard West team for giving Burke a run for their money in the state semifinals.
Yeah, Burke is a pretty good team. I think they're probably going to beat Grand Island in that state championship. But Millard West, they're returning a lot of people, you said, and we're talking about Dallas Beanham here. We got a special interview with Dallas Beanham when we get back to you guys.
All right, welcome back to the Wildcat Wire, everybody, and we're going to have our special guest, Dallas Beanham, on. How are you feeling today, Dallas?
Feeling good. How about you guys?
It's going all right. I know we're just getting done talking about this past week here, finishing up the football season. How, in general, have you felt about this year?
I think we proved ourselves, and everyone probably thought we weren't going to be as good as last year, but we obviously had some spots to fill, but we showed that we could do it because we made the semis like we didn't do last year. But we had a young team, but I feel like we showed what we needed to show, but came up short. But we'll be ready for next year.
Do you think having kind of like some low expectations coming in kind of like fired you guys up for this year?
Yeah, a little fire under us. We knew like all the talk like that we wouldn't be that good, but right after we lost to Burke week 2, we kind of just flipped a switch and we kind of went on from there, and I think we proved a lot of people wrong this year.
So obviously you were leading receiver on the offense. You played pretty good on defense when you had those snaps. About yourself, do you feel like this year has improved you a lot and that could actually help the team going into next season when you have most of the offense back?
Yeah, I think this year obviously showed what our offense can do next year, considering we have a junior quarterback, junior receivers, and we have Dan Sullivan as our running back. And I think having those people back will help us next year for our offense to make strides and getting better for next year.
With talking about Dan Sullivan a bit, he didn't really. I didn't say he would play a whole lot kind of early in the year. What kind of made him kind of turn into kind of this breakout kind of star here, in the late of the season?
So I've been playing football with him for a while, and this year he knew he probably wasn't gonna get that many snaps, but since earlier in the season we played one back with Jackson Wright, but after the Kearney game when Jackson got suspended and wasn't going to be there for the Grand Island game, he got some reps and he played a good amount of time, and the coaches saw that potential in him, and so they just continued on to put him in, and he showed why he needed to be in, and then obviously in the last half of the season he proved why he should be in and playing.
So I know just a minute ago you mentioned that Burke game kind of being the turning point of the season. What happened that made you guys kind of flip your switch and start that win streak you had?
It was we knew. So, like, after the Middle North game when we won, we kind of just thought we had it all. But that Burke game kind of showed, like, we still needed to work as hard because we came into that game, like, I don't know, maybe unprepared. And we just, like, we had a lot of turnovers and, like, we were there, but we just had a bunch of mistakes. And we knew that we can play with any team in the state, but we just got to fix those mistakes. And so all week during practices, we just worked on that and to improve our craft so we could be better, obviously, throughout the season.
So, yeah, you went on that win streak, but then you came up and lost a game at Lincoln East. And what kind of, like, just, like, happened in kind of that game? Because it was kind of a shock.
Yeah, that game we kind of just fell flat. And I think we easily could have beat that team, but they just wanted it more than us. They were a more physical team, and after that game, we knew that we should have beat them. We were the better team, and that could have been the path of the number 1 seed in the playoffs. And I think before that game, because like when they said we were the number 1 seed going to the playoffs, I think that kind of just took our minds off of, like, just actually, like, working hard and stuff. So I know we lost that game, but I think losing that game, honestly, like, after that, we played the best football we played in all season.
So we're going to flip this thing, kind of looking towards next year here. Like we said, we have a junior quarterback. Obviously, you're a junior coming back, leading receiver, Dan Sullivan. What is your kind of outlook on how this team can be next year, and how far do you think you can take this thing?
I think we have all the potential in the world right now because obviously having an experienced quarterback, that's the biggest part of your team, and experienced people all around the perimeter and in the backfield I think will help us into next year. And we'll have, I think, because we'll have the same schedule, and I think we'll be the team. We'll be a team that people don't want to see next year, I think, and we'll definitely scare some people. But I think we're going to have a good season next year.
And then I just want to add one last question to yourself. I know we just talked about this in the hallway. College?
Yeah. Mm-hmm, yeah.
What are you thinking?
I'm open to everything right now. It's kind of all my options are open, and I haven't really decided on where I want to be, but I'm just going to leave it open to the college coaches, and whoever offers me, I'll take that into consideration. But yeah, I am going on a visit to Nebraska this weekend, so unofficial.
All right. Well, thank you, Dallas, for coming on.
Thank you, guys.
We're just going to finish up this last part of the podcast. We're going to take a short break and be right back with you.
Welcome back, guys, to the Wildcat Wire. With us wrapping up the podcast here, we're going to just talk about Millard West next season. And, you know, it's pretty much the same exact schedule, just flipped home and away.
Yeah, I mean, I know we talked about a lot about what we think and this team will kind of do next year with the players they have coming back and such. But, I mean, you still look at the schedule. It's a pretty tough schedule. You have Miller North at home to start, and then Omaha Burke at home to start, the second week. So 2 quick home games right off the bat, and then you have road games against Omaha North, and as you want to say, a quote-unquote road game against Millard South that 4th week of the season. We all know how those typically end up. Then you have Bryan at home, Kearney at home, travel to Grand Island, home to Lincoln East on senior night, and then last game is away to Lincoln North Star. I think it's almost the same as this year. Really, it's the same exact schedule, just flipped home and away. But I think this plays a little bit more into the Wildcats' advantage because now you have your 2 home games to start the year against 2 pretty good teams. And then I know Omaha North is going to have to reload for next year. So, a game at Omaha Northwest, technically the Vikings' home stadium for their games. Millard South, can't really say much. That's a neutral site game. But you bring back, after that Millard South game, that's going to be a heck of a game. You bring you come back home to play Bryan and Kearney. I think that's the biggest thing is you don't have a trap game on the road against Bryan. And then that week after, you don't have to travel 2.5 hours out to Kearney to play them. Now you let Kearney travel 2.5 hours to come here after a trap game against Omaha Bryan. But then you have to travel to Grand Island. And I think that Grand Island team still has a lot of talent for next year. There's a reason why they're in the state championship right now. They're a heck of a team. We saw that when they came here to play Millard West. And then those two kind of games, you have Lincoln East at home, who could be a little bit of a challenge that we saw this year. Can't really say much about Lincoln North Star. They're not a great team, but I really think this is a little bit more favorable this year than favorable next year than it was this year.
Yeah, it does look like a different schedule. A lot of teams will be losing some people. The one team that you really got to look for on their schedule is Millard South. Millard South is going to be a heck of a team next year.
They're going to be so good.
Yeah, they're a very young team, and they're already if they're the 2 seed right now, imagine what they can be next year. They definitely could be contending for that number 1 spot in the state.
And I think Millard North will be a little bit better. They started a freshman quarterback for the whole second half of the season. And so he has that experience under his belt. I know he hasn't quite played in a game like a Millard South game or Millard West game. So that might be a little different, but that team's going to be better. Little jab at them. Hopefully they don't mix those drinks up incorrectly this time where they're throwing up all the way through that game. But, you're going to have 4 pretty competitive games to start the year. Omaha North's always a good team. Burke and Xavier Watts are going to be really good again this year, next year, and then that Millard South game. So you're going to have 3 tough tests, and then you're going to have the Millard South game, which I think has to be the marquee matchup for the season. Otherwise, Kearney Grand Island could pose some really big challenges. Kearney is going to be a really good team again next year. Their quarterback and running back were both juniors this year, and that offense was pretty explosive. So I think that could really pose some big problems for Millard West. But you get that game at home, and you travel to Grand Island. Grand Island will be a tough team. They always are. So, but I think everything else just really is in favor of them this year compared to last year.
Yeah, it's really looking like that way. I'm expecting a pretty good season. Like you were talking about earlier, Tristan Gomez coming back. That's pretty big. Dan Sullivan, who's really rise at the end of the season, is coming back. And, Coach Peterson, he's a good coach. He found a way to do it this year with this team, and I bet he's going to find a way to do it next year.
Yeah, Coach Pete and the rest of the staff are some of the top coaches that you're going to find anywhere. You're not going to find many better positional coaches than Sadowski or Jacobs or Young. All that whole group is just a really top staff. So I think they're going to get this team ready, even on the defensive side of the ball. You're losing school record amount of interceptions with Gabe Anderson. You're losing your leading tackler in Braden Cundiff. You're losing Matt Huser and Cole Aniello, 2 guys that are going to play at Division I football levels. So
yeah, I feel that the defense is going to be something that could struggle a bit next year just because they're losing so much.
Yeah, and I think they leaned a lot on that side of the ball this year. And so if they kind of find a way to work around it, maybe they play kind of a Scott Frost style, spread offense that's going to put up a lot of points, or just try and keep that defense off the field, I guess, as much as possible so they don't have to limit the number of possessions. So it'll be interesting to see how they go with it. But immediate thoughts, I think that this could really be probably a 7-2 season, or a 6-3. The only losses that I'm going to kind of say that they have right now might be Millard South and Kearney. Otherwise, I think every other game is really winnable for them.
Yeah, it's really looking like that way, but overall, it's probably going to be another exciting season day. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, you've got a lot to look forward to. Like we've said the whole time, offense side of the ball, you're gonna have some good playmakers coming back. Defense side of the ball, you're gonna have a little bit more work to do, but I really still think that this could be a really good team and compete for a state championship again next year.
Yeah, it's going to be a good season. That's going to do it for us here on the Wildcat Wire. I'm Jake Janasek.
And I'm Nate Thomas, and cue that outro music.